Every morning, Ethan wakes up and does the same thing. Before he even gets out of bed, his brain starts running a quiet checklist, and somehow, he always ends up failing it. His name is Ethan. He's 28, a graphic designer at a company he likes. He has good friends, a cozy apartment, a coffee maker he loves. By any reasonable measure, his life is going well. But here's the thing. No matter how well things go, there's always a voice. A quiet, persistent voice that says, "You're not quite good enough." He gets a compliment from his manager. For about 3 seconds, he feels good. Then it fades. Then he wonders if they were just being polite. He makes a small mistake in a presentation. A single slide has the wrong font. Nobody mentions it. But he thinks about it for 3 days. This is what low self-esteem actually looks like. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a constant low-grade feeling that you are somehow not enough, and that everyone else can probably tell. If this sounds familiar, if you've ever felt like you're performing a version of yourself and waiting to be found out, then this video is for you. Because what's happening inside your brain has a name, and more importantly, it has a solution. Today, we are going to follow Ethan's journey through his mind, his past, his brain. And by the end, you'll understand exactly what low self-esteem is, where it comes from, and what science says you can do about it. Self-esteem doesn't appear out of nowhere. It is built, slowly, starting in childhood. The experiences we have before the age of 10 are particularly powerful, because that's when our brains are most sensitive to feedback from the world. When a child is consistently criticized, ignored, or held to impossible standards, their brain begins to form a belief: I am not good enough. This belief doesn't stay in childhood. It travels with them. Psychologists call this the inner critic. It's the internalized voice of every teacher who doubted you, every parent who pushed too hard, every peer who made you feel small. Over time, you stop hearing their voices and start hearing it as your own. Now let's talk about what this does to your brain. The first thing you need to understand is something called negativity bias. Your brain, by design, pays more attention to negative experiences than positive ones. This was useful for our ancestors. Remembering danger kept them alive. But for Ethan, it means a bad interaction at work sticks in his memory 10 times longer than 5 good ones. His brain is not broken, it's just using ancient software on modern problems. The second thing happening in Ethan's brain is the default mode network, or DMN. This is a network of brain regions that activates when you're not focused on an external task. In other words, it activates when you're just thinking. For most people, the DMN runs on self-referential thinking, replaying memories, imagining futures, comparing yourself to others. For people with low self-esteem, this network has a very particular habit. It loops back to self-criticism. So even in quiet moments, waiting for the elevator, lying in bed, Ethan's brain is running the same loop. That wrong font, that compliment he didn't deserve, that person who seemed cooler than him at the party. Every time the inner critic fires, it triggers a cortisol response. Cortisol is your stress hormone. And here's the thing about cortisol. Your brain cannot tell the difference between being attacked by a bear and being attacked by your own thoughts. So Ethan is, neurologically speaking, living in a low-grade state of threat, chronically. His body is slowly exhausted by it. His motivation drops. His sleep suffers. And because cortisol also impairs the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that handles rational thinking, he becomes less able to challenge those negative thoughts. It becomes a cycle. The inner critic fires. Cortisol floods the brain. Rational thinking dims. You can't challenge the thought. The thought wins. The cycle repeats. And social media makes it worse. Every time Ethan scrolls, He is feeding his brain comparison material. And comparison, research shows, almost always makes people with low self-esteem feel worse, not better. There's one more piece to this. People with low self-esteem often become perfectionists. Not because they have high standards, but because they believe a single mistake proves what they already suspect about themselves. Perfectionism in this case is a shield. If I make everything perfect, no one can criticize me. But the shield is exhausting to hold. And it never actually makes the inner critic go quiet. So, that's what's been happening inside Ethan, inside millions of people. A childhood belief, reinforced by brain chemistry, amplified by comparison culture, locked in by perfectionism. It feels permanent. But it is not, because the same neuroplasticity that allowed these patterns to form can allow them to change. Your brain is not fixed. It is a living system that rewires itself based on what you repeatedly do and think. So what can you actually do? Science has 3 answers, and all 3 are practical, repeatable, and backed by neuroscience research. The first is self-compassion. Self-compassion, developed by psychologist Kristin Neff, is not about telling yourself you're great. It's about treating yourself with the same basic kindness you would offer a good friend who is struggling. So, when Ethan makes a mistake at work, instead of the usual spiral, he tries something different. He asks, "What would I say to my best friend if this happened to his?" And then he says that to himself. Research from the University of Texas shows that self-compassion activates the brain's care system, the same neural circuits that respond to being loved and supported. It literally calms the cortisol response. The inner critic gets quieter. The second practice is reframing the inner critic. The key insight here is this: the inner critic is not you. It is a voice you learned. A technique from acceptance and commitment therapy, called cognitive diffusion, teaches you to notice when the inner critic is speaking, and to say, "There goes that voice again." Not, "I am not good enough," but there's a thought that says, "I am not good enough." Ethan gives the inner critic a name. He calls it the auditor, because it's always checking his work and finding fault. And something interesting happens when you name it. It becomes an object you can observe, rather than an identity you inhabit. You don't have to silence the inner critic. You don't have to win an argument with it. You just have to stop letting it drive the car. It can sit in the back seat and complain all at once. You're still in control. The third practice is what researchers call a small wins journal. Every evening, Ethan writes down 3 things he did well that day. Not achievements, just things that went okay. A kind word to a coworker, showing up on time. The neuroscience behind this is simple. What you repeatedly focus on strengthens. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Every time Ethan consciously registers a small win, he is training his brain to look for evidence that he is, in fact, okay. This doesn't mean ignoring your mistakes. It means giving your brain an equal amount of airtime for what's working. Because right now, the inner critic has a monopoly on your attention. The journal breaks the monopoly. A few weeks pass. Ethan is still Ethan. He still makes mistakes. The inner critic hasn't disappeared, but something has shifted. The cycle runs a little slower. The spiral doesn't go quite as deep. And sometimes, just sometimes, he catches himself believing the good things too. That's neuroplasticity in action. The brain does not change in a dramatic moment of insight. It changes through repetition, through small practices done daily, through a patient, deliberate rewiring, one thought, one entry, one compassionate pause at a time. Ethan checks his phone one morning and sees a new message from a client. They love the project. He reads it. For the first time in a long time, he lets himself feel it. The whole 3 seconds, and then some. Self-esteem is not about becoming someone who never doubts themselves. It's not about a constant state of confidence. It's about building a relationship with yourself that is fair, that doesn't punish you for being human. The 3 practices we talked about, self-compassion, diffusing the inner critic, and the small wins journal, are not yours. They are tools. And like any tool, they only work when you pick them up. So here's a challenge. Tomorrow morning, before you open your phone, before the day gets loud, take 60 seconds. Ask yourself, what did I do okay yesterday? Just one thing. Let yourself answer honestly. Self-esteem is not something you are born with. It is not something that was given or taken from you permanently. It is a habit. And habits can be changed. That is not a platitude. That is neuroscience. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow.